Okay. Hi, Alice. I'm so happy to meet you today and have this conversation about your institute and your research. So, to get us started right away, I know that your topic is vertical development. What is that in a nutshell?
Lovely to be with you, Nadia, and thank you for the invitation. Um, Vertical development in the simplest way can be described as the way human beings grow up. And if we talk about adults, which is the focus of my research, it's how grown-ups grow up. And essentially it comes from this idea that despite what apparently we seem to reach maturity at a certain point in our lives, teenage years end and we're grown-ups, but we know now that on the inside we continue to grow throughout our lives. So that internal psychological growth is what we call vertical development.
Yes, thank you for that explanation. That makes a lot of sense, and I love this sentence, how grown-ups grow up, because it also points at how development is a lifelong process, right? And it is not just stopped because I've reached an adult stage.
Absolutely. It is a lifelong process with many stages and many aspects of it, if you want, and different people will reach certain stages. So there's always an opportunity to keep on growing. That idea that I'm too old to change, I really no longer believe in it after doing this research. I think there's no such thing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And actually, speaking about your research, I'd love to hear more about that, because you conducted your PhD thesis around vertical development, if I understand correctly, with leaders. And before you get into the results, can you tell us something about your research questions?
Yeah, maybe it's worth taking a couple of steps back just to tell you how I got to doing the research in the first place. Because I've come into academia as a practitioner. I've been a coach, a leadership facilitator for a very long time, and spent so much time like yourself in rooms with leaders, kind of supporting their growth, and in the process, gaining a lot of growth for myself. And I was always nagged by this question around, why do some people seem to change when they go through profound learning experiences? They just have this massive personal transformation and then reflects in all aspects of their lives. And then with other clients, same experience, same facilitator or same coach, but no transformation or much slower. I was always intrigued by this. What is it that we do in our profession, really? What creates that or supports that transformation? So that combined with an inherent nerdiness, I think of nerdy as a good word, a positive word. I describe myself as a lifelong nerd. It led me to deciding to jump into research and try to find some answers to these questions.
And when you then went into this field of research, I'm sure you found a lot of things in this exploration, but can you summarize some of your core findings for our audience?
Yeah, sure. I had this wonderful opportunity to study one of the largest executive leadership programs in Australia and New Zealand. It's a yearly program that brings together about 200 leaders from across sectors and across industries. And the reason this program was so fascinating to study was that there was this incredible diversity of leaders with very different backgrounds, very different professional contexts. And as it happened, I ran the study in 2020. So the pandemic had just started and everybody was in lockdown and going through this 6-month-long, super intense program. And the research question that I started with was, how do people grow psychologically, vertically develop, if they do, through a program like this? And if they do, what's their lived experience of it? There's very little research around how people actually experience transformation, what happens inside them. We have tools to measure these stages of growth. So I had the possibility to see where they started from in their growth and where they ended. So we had an objective measure of whether growth had occurred. But then my curiosity was following them through this learning journey, through journals that they completed weekly. So they reflected ongoingly whether they were in session or not, in between learning sessions. I interviewed them extensively at the end. I observed the session. So there was a lot of data collection in different ways to kind of get a feel, not of just at the end what their perception was, but during the program. And quite a few things emerged from it, really interesting things. One fascinating thing was that the people who developed were the people who, when they encountered discomfort, they stepped into the discomfort purposefully, into the pain, if you want, into the negative emotion. So what I found was that actually intuitively, these leaders interpreted anxiety, confusion, those really negative emotions that we encounter at the end of our comfort zone as opportunities for growth instead of threats. So instead of pulling back and closing in themselves, they actually opened up and took some risks in those contexts. And it could have been anything. It could have been a moment when they decided to speak up in front of 200 people and they felt the anxiety, but instead of pulling back, they stepped forward. Or a moment when they decided to experiment with some idea that they found in the program, and they took it to their board in their business. And it felt extremely risky to challenge their board. I actually remember one participant sharing a story in an interview around the almost panic attack that he had, knowing that he was going to challenge his board on a topic that he had never spoken up on before. But he decided to do it because of some of the insights he had had about himself and the way he was using his voice during the program. So that was his experiment. But that place of negative emotion where people find that, feel that terror and step into it, that was unique to the leaders who actually developed in their vertical development post-program.
Wow. I'm very impressed with and these findings, and and as we shared before, given what we do at Conscious You, I'm also really happy to hear these results, because they really map with what we've been experiencing in our programs. And coincidentally, one of the first models we share with them is that of the comfort zone and the difference between a challenge and a threat mindset. So very, very much aligned with what you just shared. Yeah. And Alice, why do you think vertical development matters today? Maybe even more than ever. Why is that relevant?
That's such a good question, and I'm also a bit cautious in answering it, because what I'm saying is this incredible explosion of interest in the topic from the moment I started my research, the moment I ended it 4 years later. It turned from a fringe topic almost into this mainstream amazing thing, which I'm very excited about. But I think with that also comes, as with anything that we're excited about, there is a risk that we almost blow up what it can do or what its value can be. And I'm always cautious about it. But that being said, vertical development is an aspect of our growth that goes hand in hand with another aspect, which we call horizontal development, which is more akin to traditional learning. You learn new skills, you learn new ways of doing things, new tools for your toolkit. That's your horizontal development. Your vertical is that maturity transformation, that shift in your internal complexity, in your mindset, in your lens, the how you look at things. Why it is important? Because there comes a time, and I use this analogy in my work, it's like playing the piano. You play one octave and you learn to play better and better and better, and you learn new techniques to use your fingers. You get really proficient at the technique of playing, but all within the same octave. That's your horizontal development. When you start to invest in your vertical development, it's like opening up new octaves. All of a sudden you have new notes. You still have the same technique, but you can apply it on a broader scale of musical notes. So you can create just simply more complex music. So it's like that with vertical and horizontal. They actually go hand in hand. So I'm a bit wary when people almost present vertical as a sort of miracle cure and the thing that's this is the future of development. Actually, it's the vertical with the horizontal working together very consciously that I think has the potential to really make a difference in the way we educate ourselves, the leaders that we work with, for people in our context working with leaders and with grown-ups in general.
What I love about this, Alice, is that it really points to how when we think about development and learning in organizations, for example, to hold these two perspectives in parallel, right? And then to think about how can I design experiences that cover both axes in a way, right? So that we really have an integrated experience that allows us to expand in this and in this direction.
That's exactly it. And it's actually one of the organizational findings that's come out of the research. It looks very much like what you described just now with the horizontal axis. So if you're a program designer or a learning and development person, or simply a leader thinking of ways to support the growth of your team, there are actually things you can think about on the horizontal axis of the horizontal development. What are the tools, the skills that your team needs? But then there are these elements on the vertical axis. Is your team taken out of their comfort zone enough? Do they have enough psychological safety to create that sweet spot between challenge and support that makes development possible? So there are a few things on the vertical axis that you can actually purposefully do to foster vertical development. So if you're aware of that whole landscape, then you can design learning experiences. You can tweak your meetings as a leader in a way that makes them developmental. And it can be as easy as asking a great question and creating a bit of dialogue and a bit of bringing the divergent voices to the table that actually becomes a developmental moment for your team. And you can do it actually purposefully if you're aware of that map with those two axes.
Mm-hmm. And Alice, if you think of the findings of your research, having looked at leaders and also having sort of differentiated those who did develop and those who didn't, if you had sort of one piece of advice for leaders who were seeking to expand themselves in a vertical direction, what would be one small step they could take towards that place?
I think the thing that intrigued me most with this idea of the ones who developed stepping into their discomfort was what allowed them to do it. And when I started to unpack, and for the others, what happened, because they too felt the discomfort, but there was a bit of a difference in their attitudes towards it. And what I found was that those who stepped into the discomfort did not just step into discomfort. There was an emotional management process almost happening inside of them where they felt the fear and then they chose to be curious about what the fear meant. So that combination, I've actually called it the contrasting emotion space, because it's this ability to feel a negative emotion, don't shut it down, really feel it, acknowledge that it's there, and then become consciously, intentionally curious. Why am I so anxious? Why am I so fearful? What is this confusion about? Could it teach me something? So always the people who grew tended to ask that curious question that almost made the pain bearable, if that makes sense. It allowed them to withstand the discomfort long enough to start thinking critically, trying new things. It didn't take away the discomfort at all. It just tempered it. So if I were to think of suggestion, and it's actually something that I started to apply in my own life, you can do it even with kids, with young kids, but just to share a very brief story with you, because we're not just leaders, we're human beings. We have so many aspects of our lives. And I don't think this is just reserved for the leadership space. My daughter was practicing the piano, funnily enough, and getting very frustrated because she wasn't happy with how it was going, and she's 7 and she gave up and started crying. And after I did this research, I remember there was one day when she was just almost banging the piano in frustration. And I said, you know what's happening to you right now? Your brain is experiencing growth pains. So whenever you feel that frustration, that's such a great sign. You could get curious as to what's next, what's beyond that, because if you try one more time after you start feeling the frustration, you're likely to make progress, because your brain is just telling you it's ready to make progress. It's growth pains. And it's incredible, Nadia, how it's shifted her attitude. Of course, she still gets frustrated, but that combination of curiosity and frustration is better than the frustration alone. So
Much
I
better.
wish we could,
Yeah.
yeah, if you could teach adults this,
Yeah.
it would be amazing
Yeah.
to pour a bit of curiosity on the negative feelings that usually we try to, push away
Yeah.
instead of feel fully.
I think that is just so beautiful that you mentioned that, because I'm just noticing again the resonance with what we do in our programs as well, and one of the cool things is teaching people how to be with, instead of either push away but also not to fix, right? Because I sometimes notice with people who are more experienced in the self-development space. Just recently, as a side note, had a group of business leaders, and one of them was encountering an emotion that he felt very strong and that was unpleasant to him. And then I noticed, he started breathing very deeply and sort of, and I know that he's an experienced meditator. And I was like, listen, don't do that right now. Don't try to make it go away. Don't relax it away or breathe it away, but actually just be with for a moment and notice what unfolds when you're present with that. And then the transformation nearly happened in the witnessing of, right? In the having a relationship to, instead of being stuck in. And so that's what I just
I
heard
love
you
it.
describe as well, right?
Absolutely. It's exactly the same thing. I think the only small add-on, which was my surprise, was that if in that being with, if you're not experienced enough to just be with, sometimes choosing to be curious about what's going on allows you to almost take that step
Yes.
that you described just now, between don't push it away, just stay with it. For some people, maybe staying with it can be unbearable initially, just if you do it outright. But if you go, oh, there's a really weird, unpleasant feeling, what's going on with it? And for a drop of curiosity on top of it, it can create a bit of that, maybe that extra step that people might need to train that muscle if it's not a strong muscle already.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. And actually that's part of the, depending on who we deal with, that's part of the process as well, is that what if, this, whatever sadness, let's say, that's coming up, what if it had a voice? Like, what does it want to say, right? What does it bring you attention to? What does it need? Even so that, again, because what I hear you describe is very much this creating a witness state within us, right? Where we're able to be with what is happening and maybe even be in dialogue with it. And that's the curiosity that you're speaking about, right?
Exactly.
So, why is this
100%.
there? Yeah. So I love that. Thank you so much. And, for you personally, is there any advice that you would have for people that, there's a lot of advice already in what you shared previously, but is there anything further where you say, even if you don't work in an organization, but maybe you're a homemaker or you're self-employed, like how would I go ahead with my own vertical development? How could I further and deepen that?
I confess to you that the word advice always makes me a bit wary, because I always think, who am I or who is anyone to have advice for anyone else? I'm such an imperfect human being, kind of figuring stuff out like everyone else. I did learn from this whole journey, because I don't think we get into work unless it's personally meaningful for us. Somehow I feel that we are probably consciously or unconsciously choosing the work that serves our own, I don't know, we're solving our own problems by doing the work we're doing. And for me, it's always been this question, how can I be a bit wiser in my life? And I have this deep belief that people don't really care about what we tell them. Our kids don't really care about what we tell them. They care deeply about who we are and how we show up. And I think that's valid in every single aspect of our lives. As a partner to our life partners, it's not about telling people that we love them, although that's wonderful, but do we actually show up? And how do we show up? So I think this is where the vertical development piece comes in. What makes me uncomfortable in this situation? What other perspective is there? How can I grow from this difficult moment that we're going through together in our family or in our friendship? It's made me more courageous in admitting that I have no idea, that I feel confused, that I'm going through a hard time, this work has almost, just given me more courage to be a bit more vulnerable with the people I love. And I found there's so much openness when I step forward with that vulnerability, and we get to work through stuff way more constructively and wisely than we would otherwise. So I just think it's grinding work every day. And I also think it's sometimes 2 steps forward and 3 steps backwards.
Yeah. But what I hear, what you just shared, Alice, is that instead of getting stuck in your fear, you very consciously also, again, choose the perspective of curiosity and asking questions instead of getting defensive, even with yourself, right?
I try very hard to. It's as I said,
well, it's work in progress.
Definitely. And there's something called fallback in this research. There's a wonderful research, Valerie Livesey, who studies fallback, this phenomenon of when we actually fall back, we catch ourselves regressing, becoming the person we don't like in our worst moments. And she talks about even catching yourself and realizing you're at your worst right now is developmental, because then from that you can learn something, from that you can grow. Sometimes you're not really able to be the best person you can be in the moment. You, on the contrary, you might be the worst person you can be in the moment. But are you aware of that happening? Are you able to revisit and go, what happened there? How can I grow from this experience? So I think it's very messy, and embracing the messiness is also perhaps quite important.
Absolutely. And it keeps bringing us to these moments of insight, right, where we become consciously unskilled or consciously unconscious, whatever you want to call it, right, where we begin to realize, oh, I didn't see that before, now I see it, and now I actually have some element of choice in there of how I want to proceed, which also isn't always very comfortable, but it's a starting point. Okay, Alice, to close, maybe tell us a few things about the program you're offering.
Yeah, thanks for that question. It's as I completed this research, my purpose to begin with was, can I have a deeper understanding of what it is that we are doing as coaches, for example, and then translate that into practices. So what I've done is I've turned as much of the research as I could into a practical program for coaches, as my first translation, and attempt at bridging these 2 realms of the theory and the practice. So the program I created is an online self-paced program for coaches who want to integrate vertical development into their practice. And it teaches them vertical development theory from across different schools of thought, but then it looks at tools, approaches. How do we work with clients at different octaves, as I like to call them, instead of stages, in honoring my piano metaphor. Working with clients at different octaves of development. What are the lines? Because again, development is very messy. There are different aspects of our development, and you could be a bit further ahead in, for example, your cognitive development than you are in your emotional development. So you might be playing a higher octave in one aspect of your being and a bit of a lower octave in another. And as a coach, if you can see those opportunities for your clients, you can actually give them that nudge, support them in developing that exact line of development that would best serve the goals that they're trying to achieve in their coaching.
Wonderful. So, it sounds amazing, Alice, and I'm very happy that you have a special offer for our readers as well. So thank you so much for this conversation, and all the best of luck with the Vertical Development Institute, and I'm sure our paths will cross again.
I'm absolutely sure they will, and thank you for having me. It was a pleasure to talk to you.